My parents gave the entire inheritance to my brother in their will and excluded me, so I stopped paying their bills. But weeks later, my mom told me the mortgage was due. I blocked her. My name is Brittany, and I need to tell you something that completely shattered my world 3 weeks ago. For the past 8 years, I've been the one keeping my family afloat financially. Every month, without fail, I've paid for my parents' groceries, their medications, doctor visits, utility bills, and house maintenance for both properties they live in. I never complained because I love them, and honestly, I thought this was what good daughters do. I work as a software engineer at a tech company downtown, and while I'm not wealthy, I make enough to cover my own expenses and theirs too. My brother Jake, on the other hand, has been unemployed for most of his adult life. He's 32 and still lives with our parents, jumping from one failed business idea to another, never holding a steady job for more than a few months. Last Tuesday, I was sitting in Mr. Henderson's office. He's been our family lawyer since I was a kid. Mom had asked me to come with her to discuss some paperwork, which I assumed was routine stuff. What I didn't expect was to discover that my mother had drafted a will that left both of my grandparents' houses exclusively to Jake. Both houses. The only real assets our family owns, built by my hardworking grandparents who started with nothing. I sat there in that leather chair, staring at the documents, reading the same lines over and over. All real property, including the family residence on Maple Street and the rental property on Oak Avenue, shall be bequeathed to Jacob Mitchell Thompson. Not a single mention of my name anywhere in the inheritance section. There must be some mistake, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Mr. Henderson adjusted his glasses and looked uncomfortable. I'm afraid not, Brittany. Your mother was very specific about her wishes. I turned to look at Mom, who was avoiding eye contact, fidgeting with her purse strap. Mom? Is this really what you want? She finally met my eyes, and I saw something there I'd never seen before. Guilt, but also stubbornness. Honey, Jake needs a place to live. You already have your own apartment, your own life. He needs security. Security? I stood up so fast my chair rolled backward. What about the security I've been providing for 8 years? What about the thousands of dollars I've spent keeping food in your refrigerator and keeping the lights on in both of those houses? That's different, Mom said, her voice getting defensive. That's just helping family. These houses, they need to stay in the family name. And I'm not family? The words came out sharper than I intended. Mr. Henderson cleared his throat. Perhaps we should discuss this at home, ladies. But I was already grabbing my purse, my hands shaking with a mixture of anger and disbelief. No, I think I've heard enough. As I walked to my car, my mind was racing. 8 years of sacrificing my own savings. 8 years of making sure they never went without anything they needed. And this is how they repay me? By ensuring I inherit absolutely nothing while my unemployed brother gets everything? The drive home was a blur. I kept thinking about all the times I'd canceled my own plans to drive them to medical appointments, all the vacations I didn't take because I was paying their bills instead. I thought about the time Jake borrowed $5,000 from them for his revolutionary food truck idea that failed within 6 months. Money that came directly from the budget I provided each month. When I got home, I sat in my living room and did something I never thought I'd do. I calculated exactly how much money I'd spent on my parents over the past 8 years. Rent for their main house, utilities for both properties, groceries, medications, car maintenance, property taxes, insurance, everything. The number was staggering, over $200,000. $200,000, and I'm not even mentioned in the will. That night, I made a decision that would change everything. The next morning, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. I made my coffee, sat at my kitchen table, and started canceling things. First, I called the grocery delivery service and canceled their weekly order. Then I canceled the automatic payments for their utilities: electric, gas, water, internet, and cable for both houses. I canceled their prescription delivery service, their lawn care, and even the monthly cleaning lady I'd been paying for. Each phone call felt like removing a weight from my shoulders. By noon, I had systematically cut off every single financial support system I'd built for them over the years. Then I drove to their house on Maple Street. Mom was in the kitchen making lunch when I walked in. She smiled when she saw me, as if nothing had changed, as if yesterday's revelation was just a minor disagreement. Oh good, you're here. I was just making some sandwiches. Want one? We need to talk, I said, placing a folder of papers on the kitchen counter. About yesterday? Honey, I know you're upset, but you'll understand when you're older. Jake really needs... No, Mom. Listen to me carefully. I opened the folder. These are printouts of every payment I've made for this family in the past 8 years. Every grocery bill, every utility payment, every medical expense, every repair bill for both houses. She glanced at the papers but waved her hand dismissively. Brittany, you don't need to. $237,412, I said clearly. That's what I've spent keeping this family afloat, while Jake has contributed exactly $0. That's not fair. Jake helps in other ways. What ways? I asked. Name one bill he's paid. One grocery shopping trip he's made with his own money. One time he's taken you to a doctor's appointment in a car he pays insurance for. Mom fell silent, and I could see Dad walking in from the living room, probably drawn by my raised voice. What's all the commotion? Dad asked. I'm explaining to Mom that as of today, I'm no longer paying for anything related to this household or the rental property. Dad's face went white. What do you mean? I mean exactly what I said. No more grocery money, no more utility payments, no more prescription costs. Nothing. If I'm not worthy of inheriting the properties I've been maintaining, then I'm not responsible for maintaining them anymore. You can't be serious, Mom said, sinking into a chair. I've never been more serious about anything in my life. I called and canceled everything this morning. Your next electric bill will come directly to you. But we can't afford all that on just our Social Security, Dad protested. Then I suggest you talk to Jake about getting a job. After all, he's inheriting properties worth over $400,000. Surely he can contribute something toward their upkeep. This is just anger talking, Mom said, tears forming in her eyes. You don't mean this. I looked at both of them, these people I'd sacrificed so much for, and felt something inside me harden. You made your choice when you decided Jake deserved everything and I deserved nothing. Now you get to live with the consequences of that choice. I picked up my folder and headed toward the door. Brittany, please, Dad called after me. You're being unreasonable. I turned back one last time. What's unreasonable is expecting someone to financially support a family that doesn't consider her worthy of being part of its future. As I drove away, I could see them standing in the doorway, looking confused and scared. For the first time in 8 years, their financial security was entirely in their own hands. That evening, Jake called me. What the hell is wrong with you? He started without even saying hello. Hello to you too, Jake. Mom and Dad are freaking out. They said you're cutting them off financially over some stupid will thing. Stupid will thing? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Jake, do you have any idea how much money I've spent on this family while you've been living rent-free and job-free? That's different. You make good money. You can afford it. And you can't work? There was silence on the other end. The will stays as it is, he finally said. Those houses should go to someone who actually needs them. Then someone who actually needs them can pay for them too. I hung up and turned off my phone. For the first time in years, my bank account was going to stay intact at the end of the month. 2 weeks into my financial boycott, reality began hitting my parents hard. The first sign was when their electricity got disconnected at the rental property on Oak Avenue. Mom called me 7 times that day, but I didn't answer. I'd changed my ringtone for their numbers to silent. The second wake-up call came when their internet and cable got cut off at the main house. Suddenly, Dad couldn't watch his evening news, and Mom couldn't video chat with her sister in California. By the 3rd week, they were rationing groceries. I know all this because Mrs. Rodriguez, their next-door neighbor, came to see me at work. She found me in the coffee shop across from my office building during my lunch break. Brittany, honey, she said, sliding into the booth across from me. I'm worried about your parents. Hello, Mrs. Rodriguez. How are you? I'm fine, but your mom and dad, they're struggling. Your father was asking me yesterday if I knew anyone who needed yard work done. Can you imagine? A 73-year-old man looking for manual labor jobs. I took a sip of my coffee and didn't respond immediately. And your mother, she continued. She's been going to 3 different grocery stores to compare prices on everything. Yesterday, I saw her putting back a container of yogurt because it was 50 cents more than she wanted to spend. That sounds like budgeting, I said calmly. Mrs. Rodriguez leaned forward. Brittany, what happened? Your parents won't tell me details, but I know something's wrong. You've always been so good to them. I looked at this woman who'd been like a second mother to me growing up, who used to give me cookies when I walked home from school, and I felt my resolve waver for just a moment. They decided Jake should inherit both of my grandparents' houses. All of the family property goes to him, and I get nothing, despite being the one who's financially supported them for 8 years. Mrs. Rodriguez's eyes widened. Both houses? Nothing for you? Nothing. But you're the one who... She paused, processing this information. You pay for everything, don't you? I did. Past tense. She sat back in her seat, shaking her head. I had no idea about the will, but I always wondered how they managed so well on just Social Security. Your father's pension is tiny, and your mother never worked outside the home. Now you know. And Jake? Where is he in all this? I almost laughed. Jake told them he can't afford to help because he doesn't have a steady job. Same excuse he's been using for 12 years. Mrs. Rodriguez was quiet for a long moment. You know, your grandmother would be rolling over in her grave if she knew Jake was getting everything while you get nothing. That woman adored you. She always said you had more backbone than the rest of the family combined. Well, she was right about the backbone part. Over the following weeks, the calls started coming. My Aunt Linda from California, Cousin Rachel, Uncle David, even my mom's childhood friend from high school. Everyone had the same message. I was being unreasonable, cruel, vindictive. I was abandoning elderly parents who needed me. What none of them mentioned was offering to help my parents themselves. The breaking point came when Father Martinez from their church showed up at my apartment on a Sunday evening. Brittany, I hope you don't mind me stopping by. Your mother asked me to speak with you. I let him in, offered him coffee, and listened to his prepared speech about forgiveness, family obligations, and Christian charity. Father Martinez, I said when he finished, let me ask you something. If someone in your congregation had been financially supporting their parents for 8 years, and then discovered those parents had written a will giving everything to a sibling who'd never contributed anything, what would you tell that person? He looked uncomfortable. I would tell them that earthly possessions aren't as important as family relationships. Would you? Even if that person had sacrificed their own financial security, their own dreams, their own future planning to take care of parents who then decided they weren't worthy of inheriting anything? Brittany, your parents love you. Do they? Because people who love you don't usually exclude you entirely from their legacy while benefiting from your sacrifice. Father Martinez left without accomplishing his mission. 2 days later, Mrs. Rodriguez came to see me again, but this time her approach was different. I've been thinking about our conversation, she said, and I need to tell you something. I think you're right. That surprised me. I've been watching your parents for 3 weeks now, and I've been watching Jake. Do you know what that boy does all day? He sits in that rental house playing video games. His parents are rationing food and struggling to pay bills. And he's in there playing games and ordering pizza delivery. Pizza delivery? I asked. With what money? I wondered the same thing. So I asked him directly yesterday when I saw the delivery car. He said he had some cash from selling something online. Brittany, if he has money for pizza, why doesn't he have money to help his parents buy groceries? I felt vindicated, but also sad. This was exactly what I'd been trying to tell everyone. And another thing, Mrs. Rodriguez continued, I never knew you were paying for everything. I always thought your parents were managing well on their own. If I'd known they were completely dependent on you financially, I would have understood their situation differently. Most people don't know. I never advertised it. Well, maybe you should have. Because now I'm looking at this whole situation and wondering what kind of parents take that much financial support from one child and then give everything to the other child who does nothing. That afternoon, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. Brittany, this is Tom Henderson, the lawyer. I think we need to talk. About what? Your parents came to see me today. They want to know if there's a way to modify the will temporarily, just to get you to resume financial support. I almost laughed. Temporarily. They're not ready to make permanent changes, but they're wondering if they could add some provision that might satisfy you for now. Mr. Henderson, let me be very clear. Either they value me enough to include me as an equal heir, or they don't. There's no middle ground here. Brittany, I have to tell you, I've been practicing law for 30 years, and I've seen this situation before. Usually the child who's been providing support is the one who gets the larger inheritance, not the one who gets excluded entirely. Usually, in 90% of cases like this, yes, what your parents are doing is unusual. After I hung up, I realized that even their own lawyer thought they were being unreasonable. But I also realized something else. They were starting to crack. 5 weeks after I'd cut off all financial support, my phone rang at 6:47 a.m. on a Tuesday morning. It was Mom, and she was crying so hard I could barely understand her. Brittany, please, you have to help us. There's something I never told you about the Oak Avenue house. I was immediately alert. What about it? There's still a mortgage on it, a big one. Your father, he took out a home equity loan against it 5 years ago when he had that heart surgery. And we never paid it off. The payments are $1,500 a month, and we're 3 months behind. I sat up in bed, my mind racing. 3 months behind? How were you making the payments before? Through her sobs, the truth came out. You were making the payments. Remember when I told you our property taxes went up? That extra money every month? That was going to the mortgage payment. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. You lied to me. For 3 years, you told me the property taxes had gone up, and I was actually paying the mortgage on a house you were planning to give entirely to Jake. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. But Brittany, they're going to foreclose. We got the papers yesterday. We have 30 days to catch up on the payments or they're taking the house. How much do you owe total? $87,000. I was quiet for a long moment, processing this information. So let me get this straight. You want me to save a house that's going to belong to Jake, using money I've earned, while I'm not even mentioned in your will? Please. Brittany, it's half of everything we have to leave behind. If we lose this house, Jake only inherits 1 property instead of 2. The irony was staggering. And what does Jake say about this situation? He doesn't know yet. We were hoping you could help us figure out what to do before we tell him. You haven't even told the person who's supposed to inherit this house that he might lose it? After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen drinking coffee and thinking, this changed everything. They weren't just expecting me to support them while they were alive. They'd been tricking me into paying for Jake's inheritance. I decided to do something I'd never done before. I called Jake directly. Jake, we need to talk about the Oak Avenue house. What about it? Did you know there's a mortgage on it that's about to go into foreclosure? Silence. Jake, what are you talking about? I explained the situation and I could hear him getting agitated. So you're telling me that one of the houses I'm supposed to inherit might get taken by the bank? That's exactly what I'm telling you. Well, you have to do something about it. I have to do something about it? Jake, it's your inheritance. Why don't you do something about it? I don't have that kind of money. Then get a job and earn it. Brittany, come on, you know I'm not good with regular jobs. I'm more of an entrepreneur. I almost choked on my coffee. An entrepreneur? Jake, name one business venture of yours that's made any money. That's not the point. The point is that Mom and Dad need help, and you're the only one who can provide it. No, the point is that you're 32 years old and you've never paid a bill in your life, yet you expect to inherit everything while I inherit nothing. Look, maybe we can work something out with the will after we get through this crisis. What kind of something? I don't know. Maybe you could inherit, like, 20% or something. I hung up on him. Later that day, I got a call from Dad. Brittany, Jake told us you two talked about the house situation. And he suggested maybe we could adjust the will to give you a small portion, maybe 20 or 30%, if you help us save the Oak Avenue property. 20 or 30%? I could feel my blood pressure rising. Dad, I've paid over $200,000 to support this family. I've been paying the mortgage on that house for 3 years without even knowing it. And you think I should be grateful for 20%? We're trying to be fair here, Brittany. Fair? Fair would have been including me equally in the first place. Fair would have been telling me I was paying a mortgage instead of lying about property taxes. Fair would have been Jake getting a job sometime in the past decade. Please, honey, we're running out of time. The bank won't extend the deadline. I took a deep breath. Here's what's going to happen. Dad, you're going to tell Jake that if he wants to inherit those houses, he needs to figure out how to save them. I'm done being the family ATM for properties I'll never own. But he can't possibly come up with that kind of money. Then I guess he's going to inherit 1 house instead of 2. Actions have consequences. That night, I calculated what I'd actually paid toward that mortgage over 3 years. $54,000. I'd unknowingly paid $54,000 toward Jake's inheritance while being completely excluded from any benefit. The aftermath was intense. Mom called me constantly. Dad left increasingly desperate voicemails, and Jake kept trying to negotiate different percentages like he was doing me a favor. Even relatives I hadn't heard from in years were suddenly reaching out with their opinions about my selfishness. But it was Mrs. Rodriguez's visit on Thursday evening that made me realize I needed to take drastic action. Brittany, honey, I hate to bother you, but your mother collapsed in her kitchen today. I felt my heart skip. Is she okay? She's fine physically, but she was crying so hard she couldn't breathe. She kept saying she couldn't lose the house, that your grandfather would never forgive her if she lost the house he worked so hard to buy. I closed my eyes. Mrs. Rodriguez, I know you're angry, and you have every right to be, but she's making herself sick over this. That night, I made a decision that surprised even me. I was going to end this once and for all, but not in the way anyone expected. I went to my laptop and started blocking phone numbers. Mom's cell phone, Dad's cell phone, their landline, Jake's number. I blocked them on social media, on email, on every platform where they could reach me. Then I called my building's front desk. Hi, this is Brittany in 4B. I need to add some names to the do not allow list for visitors. I gave them my parents' and Jake's full names and descriptions. Next, I called my phone company and changed my number entirely. I kept the same phone, but got a completely new number that nobody in my family had. Finally, I drafted an email to my entire extended family. Aunts, uncles, cousins, family friends, everyone who'd been pressuring me about this situation. The email was simple. I will no longer be responding to calls, texts, emails, or messages about my parents' financial situation or their will. My decision is final. Anyone who continues to contact me about this matter will also be blocked. I'm moving forward with my life, and I suggest everyone else do the same. I sent it to 43 people, and then blocked all of their numbers too. The silence that followed was both terrifying and liberating. For the first time in weeks, my phone wasn't ringing constantly. No one was leaving tearful voicemails or angry texts. I could eat dinner without being interrupted by someone telling me what a horrible daughter I was. But the silence also meant I had no idea what was happening with them. Were they okay? Had they figured out a solution? Was Mom still making herself sick with worry? I found myself checking the local news website, half expecting to see a story about elderly couple loses home to foreclosure. The not knowing was almost worse than the constant harassment. I threw myself into work and started seeing a therapist for the first time in my life. Dr. Sarah helped me understand that what I was experiencing was grief, not just for the relationship with my parents, but for the version of them I'd believed in. You're mourning the parents you thought you had, she explained during our third session. The ones who valued you, who saw your sacrifices, who would naturally want to include you in their legacy. But they are my parents, the same people who raised me, who I've been helping all these years. Yes, but you're seeing them clearly for the first time. Sometimes the people we love are capable of treating us badly, even when they claim to love us back. 3 weeks into my communication blackout, I was getting groceries when I spotted a familiar figure in the frozen food aisle. It was Jake, and he looked terrible. His hair was greasy, his clothes looked like he'd slept in them, and he was studying the price tags on frozen pizzas like he was solving a complex math problem. He saw me at the same moment I saw him. For a second, we just stared at each other across the freezer cases. Then he walked over. Brittany, thank God. I've been trying to reach you for weeks. I didn't say anything. Look, things are really bad. Really, really bad. Mom's been having panic attacks, Dad's blood pressure is through the roof, and the bank? God, the bank is processing the foreclosure. I pushed my cart past him toward the checkout lanes. Brittany, wait, please, we lost the house. We lost the Oak Avenue house. Jake was following me now, his voice getting desperate. I'm only going to inherit one house now instead of two because you wouldn't help. I stopped walking and turned to look at him. We need to fix this, he continued. All of it. The money situation, the will, everything. Mom and Dad are ready to talk about changing the will. Really changing it. Not just the small percentage thing. I studied his face. He looked genuinely panicked. Genuinely desperate. How much of the will? I asked quietly. Whatever you think is fair. 50-50. We'll split everything 50-50. For a moment, I felt a surge of something that might have been hope. Then I remembered everything that had led to this moment. Jake, I said calmly, 3 months ago, 50-50 might have been enough. But that was before I found out you all had been lying to me about what I was paying for. That was before you offered me 20% like you were doing me a favor. That was before you called me selfish for not wanting to pay for your inheritance. His face crumpled. Brittany, please. I'm sorry. We're all sorry. I looked at this man who had never worked consistently, never contributed to the family finances, never took responsibility for anything, and I felt something I'd never felt before toward my brother. Pity. I'm not interested in being anyone's backup plan, Jake. You made your choices. Now live with them. I walked away, leaving him standing next to the frozen pizzas, and I didn't look back. 2 months later, I learned about the foreclosure through an unexpected source, a letter from the bank's legal department addressed to me personally. I opened it with shaking hands, wondering how they'd even gotten my new address. The letter informed me that as someone who had been making mortgage payments on the Oak Avenue property, I had certain rights regarding the foreclosure proceedings, and an opportunity to assume the loan if I wished. The house was scheduled for auction in 10 days. I stared at the letter for a long time, realizing that my parents had probably given the bank my information years ago when they'd set up the automatic payments from my account. To the bank? I looked like I was responsible for the mortgage, even though I'd never been on the deed. That evening, I did something I hadn't done in months. I drove past both of my parents' houses. The Oak Avenue property had a large foreclosure notice stapled to the front door and weeds growing in the yard. The windows were dark, and Jake's beat-up Honda wasn't in the driveway. The for rent sign was gone, replaced with a notice of trustee sale sign. The main house on Maple Street looked smaller somehow, shabbier. The lawn was overgrown, and I could see that one of the shutters was hanging crooked. Dad's old truck was parked in the driveway, but the inspection stickers had expired months ago. I sat in my car across the street, remembering all the Sundays I'd spent here, all the family dinners, all the times I'd helped Dad fix things around the house or sat with Mom while she recovered from various minor surgeries. This was the house where I'd grown up, where I'd learned to ride a bike in the driveway, where I'd brought my first boyfriend to meet my parents. And according to their will, none of it would ever be mine. The next day, I called Mr. Henderson. "Brittany, I'm so glad you called. Your parents have been trying to reach you for months." "I'm not calling about them. I'm calling about the foreclosure. I got a letter from the bank." "Ah, yes. I was wondering if you'd received that. Technically, since you were making the payments, you have standing to intervene in the foreclosure process." "What would that mean exactly?" "You could assume the mortgage, catch up on the back payments, and continue making payments. The property would then be yours, regardless of what your parents' will says." I was quiet for a moment, processing this information. How much would I need to catch up on the back payments? About $12,000, plus fees, total probably around $15,000. $15,000 to own a house worth at least $150,000. A house I'd been unknowingly paying the mortgage on for 3 years. And if I did this, my parents couldn't contest it? No. The bank has the right to foreclose, and you have the right to assume the loan as someone who was making payments. It's all perfectly legal. I need to think about this. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. I could save the house, but it would mean taking something that my parents had planned to give to Jake. On the other hand, I'd already paid $54,000 toward that mortgage without knowing it. In a very real sense, I'd already been buying that house for 3 years. The next morning, I made my decision. I called the bank. I want to assume the mortgage on the Oak Avenue property and bring the payments current. Within a week, I owned a house. The same house my parents had lied to me about. The same house they'd planned to give to Jake as part of his inheritance. I paid the back payments and fees with money from my savings account. Money I had because I'd stopped supporting my parents. I didn't tell anyone what I'd done. I simply hired a property management company to clean it up and rent it out. Within 2 weeks, I had tenants and was collecting $900 a month in rental income. 3 weeks later, Mrs. Rodriguez tracked down my new phone number through my work. "Brittany, honey, I hope you don't mind me calling, but I had to tell you what happened." "What happened?" "Your parents found out about the house. About you buying it. Jake saw the new tenants moving in and asked around until he figured out what had happened." I waited. "Your mother had another breakdown. Not just crying this time, a real breakdown. She kept saying she'd lost everything, that she'd ruined everything, that she'd driven away the only child who ever helped them." I felt a pang of something. Not quite guilt, but not satisfaction either. "And your father, Brittany, he looked so old when I saw him yesterday. So defeated. He told me he finally understood what they'd done to you." "What do you mean?" "He said they'd taken your money for years, and then tried to take your inheritance too. He said he never realized how much they'd been taking advantage of you until it was too late." Mrs. Rodriguez paused. "Jake moved out." "What?" "He moved back in with some friend. Said he couldn't stand being around them anymore because they blame him for everything that went wrong. Apparently, there was a big fight where your mother told him he was useless and your father said he was ashamed to have raised such a lazy son." I absorbed this information slowly. Jake was gone. My parents were alone in that house, probably for the first time in years. "Brittany," Mrs. Rodriguez continued, "I think they're ready to really talk now, really change things." "What makes you think that?" "Because your mother asked me to find your new phone number. She said she wanted to offer you the Maple Street house." "Offer me what?" "She wants to sign it over to you now while she's still alive. She said she wants to make sure you get something, even if it means Jake gets nothing." I was quiet for a long moment. "She also said to tell you that she's sorry, really, truly sorry, and that she understands if you never want to speak to them again, but she hopes you'll at least consider letting them try to make this right." After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen with a cup of coffee, thinking about everything that had happened. I owned one of the houses now. My parents were apparently ready to give me the other one. Jake was out of the picture entirely. I'd won, in a sense. But it didn't feel like victory. It felt like watching a family implode. The next day, I drove past the Maple Street house again. This time, I saw Dad in the yard, trying to fix the crooked shutter with a screwdriver. He looked thin and frail, older than his 73 years. For the first time in months, I felt genuinely sorry for him. The news of what I'd done spread through the neighborhood quickly. Within a few days, I started hearing from people I hadn't spoken to in years, some supportive, others critical. My cousin Rachel called my work number since I'd blocked her personal line. "Brittany, I can't believe you foreclosed on your parents' house." "I didn't foreclose on anything. Rachel, I prevented a foreclosure by assuming a mortgage that I'd been unknowingly paying for 3 years. But that house was supposed to go to Jake. According to who? I never agreed to pay for Jake's inheritance. This is vindictive and you know it. What's vindictive is letting your daughter pay for a house for 3 years while lying about what the money is for, then planning to give that house to your unemployed son. But not everyone saw it that way. My coworker Jennifer stopped by my desk Monday morning. "I heard through the grapevine what's been happening with your family. I just wanted to say I think you did the right thing." That surprised me. "Really?" My sister went through something similar. She supported our dad for 15 years, and when he died, everything went to our brother who'd never sent him a dime. Some parents have this weird bias toward their sons, especially the ones who can't take care of themselves. I never thought about it that way. It's more common than you think. The responsible child gets taken advantage of while the irresponsible one gets rewarded. You stood up for yourself. Dr. Sarah helped me process the conflicting emotions during our session that week. "How do you feel about owning the house?" "Confused, mostly. Part of me feels like I earned it. I did pay the mortgage for 3 years. But part of me feels like I stole something from my family." "Did you steal it? Or did you stop allowing yourself to be stolen from?" That was a perspective I hadn't considered. "Brittany, you've spent 8 years being financially exploited by people who claimed to love you. When you finally protected yourself, they called you selfish. When you reclaimed something you'd unknowingly paid for, they called you vindictive. Do you see the pattern?" I did see it. And I was starting to understand that my guilt was less about what I'd done and more about a lifetime of being taught that putting myself first was wrong. The real test came when Mrs. Rodriguez called again. "Brittany, your mother wants to meet with you, just the two of you. She says she has something important to give you." "What kind of something?" "I don't know. But she seemed very determined. She asked me to tell you that she understands if you say no, but this might be her last chance to try to fix what she broke." I thought about it for 3 days before agreeing to meet her at the coffee shop near my office, neutral territory where I could leave if things went badly. Mom was already there when I arrived, sitting in a corner booth with a manila envelope in front of her. She looked smaller than I remembered, grayer, and there were dark circles under her eyes. "Brittany," she said when she saw me, her voice barely above a whisper. I sat down across from her but didn't say anything. "Thank you for coming. I wasn't sure you would. Mrs. Rodriguez said you had something to give me." Mom pushed the envelope across the table. "The deed to the Maple Street house. I had Mr. Henderson prepare the transfer papers. It's yours now if you want it." I stared at the envelope but didn't touch it. "There are no conditions," she continued. "No strings attached. I'm not asking you to take care of us or give us money or anything else. I just want you to have what should have been yours all along." "What about Jake?" "Jake made his choices. He's 32 years old and he's never held a job for more than 6 months. He's never contributed anything to this family except problems and expenses. I don't know what I was thinking, planning to give him everything." I picked up the envelope and looked inside. Legal documents transferring ownership of the house to me, signed and notarized. "Why now?" I asked. Mom's eyes filled with tears. "Because I finally understand what we did to you. Not just the will, everything. We took advantage of your love, your sense of responsibility, your generosity. We treated you like a bank account instead of a daughter. You lied to me about the mortgage payments. Yes, and I'm ashamed of that every day. You excluded me from the family legacy while I was paying to maintain it. Yes, you called me selfish when I finally stood up for myself. Yes." The tears were flowing freely now. "Brittany, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I know I probably destroyed our relationship forever. But I needed you to know that I finally see what I did, and I'm sorry." I sat there looking at this woman who'd raised me, who'd taught me to be responsible and caring, and who'd then exploited those very qualities for years. "What happens now?" I asked. I spent the rest of that week thinking about my mother's question. What happens now? I owned both houses that had once belonged to my grandparents. My parents were struggling financially. Jake was out of the picture, and I had all the power in this situation. The irony wasn't lost on me that the very thing they'd tried to deny me, ownership of the family properties, had come to me anyway, just through a different path. I found myself driving past their house several times that week, not stopping, just observing. The yard still looked neglected. Dad's truck still had expired tags. I could see them through the kitchen window one evening, eating what looked like a very simple dinner. They were managing on just their Social Security now, about $1,300 a month total. I knew because I'd been supplementing that income for so many years. Rent alone in our area was typically $800 to $1,000 a month, so they were probably spending more than half their income just on housing costs for the one remaining property. Doctor, Sarah and I talked through the options during our next session. You have a choice to make, she said, but this time it's truly your choice. You're not being manipulated or guilted into anything. You have complete control over the situation. Sometimes I think that makes it harder. How so? When they had all the power, it was easier to know what the right thing to do was. Stand up for myself. But now that I have all the power, I'm not sure what the right thing is. What are you considering? Part of me wants to help them again. Not like before, not paying for everything, but maybe something reasonable. They're old, they're struggling, and despite everything that happened, they are still my parents. And the other part of you? The other part of me thinks they made their bed and should lie in it. They exploited me for years, excluded me from their will, called me selfish when I stood up for myself. Why should I help them now just because they finally realized they need me? I spent another sleepless night weighing these options before I made my decision. I called Mom the next day. I want to see both you and Dad tomorrow evening, 7 o'clock at your house. Brittany, yes, of course. Should we prepare anything? Just be ready to listen. The next evening, I parked in their driveway and walked up to the front door for the first time in 4 months. Dad answered the door, and I was shocked by how much weight he'd lost. Brittany, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Come in, come in. We sat in their living room, the same room where I'd spent countless evenings over the years, watching TV with them, helping them sort through paperwork, listening to their stories about their day. I have some things to say, I began, and I need you both to let me finish before you respond. They nodded. First, I want you to understand something. I didn't cut you off financially to hurt you. I did it because continuing to support people who didn't value me enough to include me in their legacy was destroying my self-respect. Dad started to speak, but I held up my hand. Second, I need you to acknowledge that what you did to me was wrong. Not just the will, everything. Taking my money for years while lying about what it was for. Planning to give Jake everything while giving me nothing. Calling me selfish when I finally stood up for myself. It was wrong, Mom said quietly. All of it. Good. Because I need to know that you understand that before we talk about what happens next. I took a deep breath. I own both houses now. The Oak Avenue property through the foreclosure assumption, and the Maple Street house through the deed transfer. That means I have something I never had before. Choices. They waited. I've decided I'm willing to help you again, but on completely different terms than before. The relief on their faces was visible. Here's what I'm offering. You can live in this house rent-free for the rest of your lives. When you're both gone, I'll inherit it because I already own it. I'll pay for major repairs and maintenance because it's my property, and it's in my interest to maintain it. They started to smile, but I wasn't finished. However, you'll be responsible for your own utilities, groceries, medical expenses, and day-to-day living costs. I'll give you $300 a month to help bridge the gap between your Social Security and your actual expenses. But that's it. Brittany, that's very generous, Dad began. I'm not finished. There are conditions. If Jake ever moves back in here, the deal is off immediately. If either of you ever asks me for money beyond the $300 a month, the deal is off. If either of you ever criticizes my boundaries or calls me selfish for maintaining them, the deal is off. I paused to let that sink in. And one more thing. I want a written apology from both of you acknowledging what you did and how it affected me. Not for anyone else to see, just for me to have. Mom was crying again, but this time they seemed like tears of gratitude rather than despair. Brittany, she said, that's more than fair. It's more than we deserve. Yes, it is, but it's what I'm willing to do. Dad cleared his throat. What about Jake? Should we tell him about this arrangement? That's up to you. But make sure he understands that his inheritance is gone. Both houses belong to me now, and they'll stay that way. As I drove home that night, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Peace. Not the bitter satisfaction of revenge, but the calm confidence of someone who'd taken control of their life and set healthy boundaries. I'd found a way to help my parents without sacrificing my self-respect, and I'd done it entirely on my terms. 2 weeks after establishing our new arrangement, Mr. Henderson called me with unexpected news. "Brittany, I thought you should know that Jake came to see me yesterday." "About what?" "He wants to contest the deed transfer for the Maple Street house. He's claiming that your mother wasn't mentally competent when she signed it over to you." I felt my stomach drop. Is that even possible? Technically, yes. If he could prove she was under duress or not of sound mind, he might have a case. But Brittany, I was there when she signed the papers. She was completely lucid and very clear about what she was doing and why. What does this mean for me? Probably nothing. Jake doesn't have money for a lawyer, and any attorney would want a substantial retainer for this type of case. Plus, he'd have to prove that your mother was incompetent, which would be very difficult given that I have documentation of our conversations and her clear reasoning for the transfer. Should I be worried? I doubt anything will come of it, but I wanted you to be aware. That evening, Dad called me. The first time he'd used his phone to contact me since I'd unblocked their numbers. "Brittany, Jake came by today. He was very upset about the house situation." "What did he say?" "He accused us of stealing his inheritance and giving it to you. He said he was going to take legal action." "And what did you tell him?" "I told him the truth, that we'd treated you unfairly for years, that you'd paid for both houses in different ways, and that we were trying to make things right." "How did he respond to that?" Dad was quiet for a moment. "He said we were all crazy if we thought he was going to let this stand. Then he stormed out." 3 days later, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. "Brittany, this is David Patterson, an attorney here in town. I'm representing your brother Jake in a matter concerning some property transfers." "I see. I'm calling to see if you'd be interested in settling this matter out of court. My client is willing to accept the Oak Avenue property as his inheritance if you'll transfer the Maple Street property back to your parents' estate." I almost laughed. "So Jake wants me to give him the house I bought through the foreclosure and also give up the house my mother legally transferred to me?" "Well, when you put it that way, Mr. Patterson, let me ask you something. Did Jake tell you that I financially supported our parents for 8 years while he contributed nothing? Did he mention that I unknowingly paid the mortgage on the Oak Avenue property for 3 years? Did he explain that our parents originally planned to give him both houses while excluding me entirely from their will?" There was a pause. "Those details weren't fully explained to me. I suggest you get the full story from your client before you call me again." I hung up and immediately called Mr. Henderson. "I just got a call from Jake's lawyer wanting me to settle." "What kind of settlement?" "He wants me to give Jake the Oak Avenue house and transfer the Maple Street house back to my parents' estate." Mr. Henderson actually chuckled. "That's quite ambitious of him. Is this going to be a problem?" "Brittany, let me explain something about probate law. Your mother transferred the Maple Street house to you while she was alive, of her own free will, with proper legal documentation. That's called a gift deed, and it's very difficult to contest. And the Oak Avenue house? You assumed a mortgage that was in default and saved the property from foreclosure. You had legal standing to do that because you'd been making the payments. Jake has no claim to that property whatsoever. So I don't need to worry? I wouldn't lose sleep over it. Jake's attorney is probably working on contingency, hoping for a quick settlement. When he realizes how weak the case is, he'll likely drop it." Sure enough, 2 weeks later, Mr. Henderson called me back. Jake's attorney withdrew from the case. Apparently, when he dug deeper into the financial records and saw how much you'd contributed to the family over the years, he realized there was no viable case. And Jake? According to your parents, he's moved back in with his friend permanently. He told them he wants nothing to do with any of you anymore. I felt a mix of relief and sadness. Relief that the legal threat was over, but sadness that my family had completely fractured. Jake was gone, probably forever. My relationship with my parents was rebuilt, but fundamentally different. The family I'd grown up in no longer existed. Dr. Sarah helped me process these feelings. It's normal to grieve the loss of your family structure, even when that structure was dysfunctional. I keep wondering if there was a way to fix things without everything falling apart. Brittany, you didn't cause this situation. You responded to it. Your parents' choices created the crisis, and Jake's choices escalated it. You just refused to keep enabling a system that was hurting you. But now Jake's completely out of our lives. And whose choice was that? She was right. Jake had chosen to contest the legal transfers rather than accept responsibility for his role in the family's financial problems. Jake had chosen to cut off contact when he couldn't get what he wanted. Jake had made his own decisions. A month later, I was having dinner with my parents, our first family meal in over 6 months. The dynamic was completely different now. They asked about my work, my life, my plans. They didn't hint about needing money or help with various expenses. They seemed genuinely interested in me as a person rather than as a resource. "Brittany," Mom said as I was getting ready to leave, "I want you to know how proud I am of you." Proud of me? For standing up for yourself, for not letting us take advantage of you anymore. I raised you to be strong and independent, and then I spent years trying to make you weak and dependent. I'm glad you didn't let me succeed. As I drove home that night, I realized that while I'd lost the family I thought I had, I'd gained something more valuable. A family that actually respected me. 6 months into our new arrangement, I was sitting in my therapist's office reflecting on how much had changed. "How are things with your parents now?" Dr. Sarah asked. "Better than they've ever been, honestly. I see them once a week for dinner. We talk on the phone every few days, and for the first time in my adult life, they seem to see me as their daughter, rather than their financial safety net. And how does that feel? Like the relationship I always wished we could have." It was true. Without the constant undercurrent of financial obligation and resentment, I was discovering that I actually enjoyed spending time with my parents. Dad had started volunteering at the local food bank, something he'd never had time for when he was constantly worried about money. Mom had joined a book club and was taking a watercolor painting class at the community center. They were living within their means for the first time in years, and it had forced them to find purpose and activities that didn't cost money. The $300 I gave them each month covered the gap between their social security and their basic needs, and they'd learned to budget carefully for everything else. "What about Jake?" Dr. Sarah asked. "No contact at all. Mom told me he got a job at a warehouse about an hour away and is renting a room from a coworker. Apparently, losing the inheritance and the legal case was a wake-up call for him. How do you feel about that?" Sad, but not guilty anymore. Jake's 33 years old. If he needed a life crisis to finally get a job and take responsibility for himself, then maybe this was the best thing that could have happened to him. The Oak Avenue house had turned out to be an excellent investment. After some minor renovations, I was renting it for $1,200 a month, which more than covered the mortgage payment and gave me additional income. I'd used some of that extra money to set up a small emergency fund for my parents' unexpected expenses. Medical bills, car repairs, things like that, but only for true emergencies. "I need to tell you something," I said to Dr. Sarah. "Jake reached out to me last week." "How?" "He sent a letter to my work address. I guess he figured out where I worked from my LinkedIn profile." "What did he say?" I pulled the letter from my purse. I'd been carrying it around for days, not sure how to feel about it. He apologized. Really apologized. Not just the surface-level sorry he used to give when he wanted something. He said he understood now why I did what I did, and that he was ashamed of how he'd treated me and our parents for so many years. How did that make you feel? Surprised, and a little hopeful, I guess. Are you thinking about responding? I don't know. Part of me wants to, but part of me is worried that any contact will just restart the old patterns. Dr. Sarah nodded. What would contact with Jake look like for you? What would you need from him to feel safe having him in your life again? I thought about that question for the rest of the week. What would I need from Jake? First, consistency. Not just a letter of apology, but sustained evidence that he'd actually changed. A steady job, taking responsibility for his own life, contributing to the family in positive ways. Second, respect for the boundaries I'd established. No asking me for money, no expecting me to solve his problems, no trying to guilt me into changing the property arrangements. Third, accountability. Acknowledgement that his actions had consequences, that losing his inheritance was the direct result of his own choices, not something that was unfairly done to him. A week later, I wrote back. A short letter explaining that while I appreciated his apology, I needed to see sustained change over time before I'd be ready to rebuild a relationship with him. I told him that if he was serious about making amends, he should focus on being a better son to our parents and a responsible adult, and that maybe in a year or two we could try talking again. I never heard back from him, which told me everything I needed to know about his level of commitment to change. But that was okay. I'd learned that I couldn't control other people's choices, only my own responses to them. 3 months later, I got a call from Mrs. Rodriguez. "Brittany, honey, I have wonderful news. Your parents just told me they're planning a cruise for their 50th wedding anniversary next year." "A cruise? Really? Your father has been saving up his volunteer stipend from the food bank, and your mother has been selling her watercolor paintings at the community center craft fair. They've been planning this for months." I felt a surge of pride and happiness for them. They were finding ways to enjoy their lives and create new memories without depending on me to fund their dreams. That's fantastic, Mrs. Rodriguez. They're so proud that they're paying for it themselves. Your mother told me it's the first vacation they've taken in 20 years that they actually earned the money for. After I hung up, I realized that this was what success looked like. Not winning or losing, not getting revenge or extracting apologies, but creating a family dynamic where everyone took responsibility for their own lives while still caring for each other. I'd gone from being the family ATM to being a daughter, and my parents had gone from being dependents to being independent adults who happened to be my family. It had taken a crisis to get here, but we'd all come out stronger on the other side. 1 year after the crisis that changed everything, I was cleaning out some old files when I found the folder of financial records I'd shown my parents that first day. $237,412. I'd kept every receipt, every bank statement, every proof of payment from 8 years of supporting them. I sat there looking at those papers and realized I didn't need them anymore. They'd served their purpose, proving to myself and my family that my contributions had been real and substantial. But now they just represented a chapter of my life that was over. I shredded every single document. That weekend was my parents' 50th wedding anniversary, and they were leaving for their cruise on Monday. They'd invited me to their small celebration dinner, just the three of us and Mrs. Rodriguez, who'd become like family over the years. "Brittany," Dad said, raising his glass of wine, "we want to make a toast." I looked at these two people who'd raised me, exploited me, and then finally learned to respect me. They looked healthier and happier than they had in years. "To our daughter," Mom continued, "who taught us that love isn't about what you can do for someone, but about who you choose to be for them. And who showed us that being a family means everyone contributes what they can, not just one person carrying everyone else," Dad added. Mrs. Rodriguez wiped her eyes. To Brittany, who stood up for herself when no one else would, I felt my own eyes getting watery. To second chances and new beginnings. After dinner, Mom pulled me aside. "I have something for you," she said, handing me a small wrapped package. Inside was a photo of my grandparents standing in front of the Maple Street house the day they bought it, along with a handwritten note from my grandmother that I'd never seen before. The note read, "For whoever inherits this house, remember that home isn't just a building. It's the love and sacrifices that happen inside it. Make sure that love and sacrifice flow both ways." "I found this in Grandma's papers after she died," Mom explained. "I've been saving it, but I never knew who to give it to. Now I know it was always meant for you." That night, I drove past both properties that were now mine. The Oak Avenue house had a lovely young family living in it, with bikes in the driveway and a garden growing in the backyard. The Maple Street house looked cozy and well-maintained, with warm light glowing from the windows where my parents were probably watching their evening TV shows. Both houses were thriving because they were occupied by people who valued them and took care of them. That seemed fitting. 2 years later, I got an unexpected call from Jake. Not a letter this time, but an actual phone call to my work number. "Brittany, I hope it's okay that I'm calling." "Hi, Jake. I wanted to let you know that I'm getting married next month." That surprised me. "Congratulations." Her name is Linda, and she's amazing. She's been helping me understand a lot of things about myself and about our family. That's good to hear. "Brittany, I know I don't have the right to ask this, but would you consider coming to the wedding? I'd really like you to meet her, and I'd like her to meet the sister who taught me what accountability looks like." I was quiet for a moment. "I've had the same job for 18 months now," he continued. "I'm paying my own rent, my own bills, everything. And I've been going to therapy to work on why I spent so many years thinking the world owed me something. Jake, I'm proud of you for making those changes. I know I can't undo the damage I caused, but I'm hoping maybe we can start over, not as the people we used to be, but as the people we are now." I went to the wedding. Jake looked different. Older, more serious, more grounded. Linda was a nurse who clearly didn't tolerate nonsense but was warm and funny. During the reception, Jake pulled me aside. "I need you to know something," he said. "I understand now why you did what you did. Not just cutting off the money, but taking the houses too. You didn't steal anything from me. You took back what you'd already paid for. Thank you for saying that. And I need you to know that I don't want anything from you. I'm not trying to get back into the will or get money or anything like that. I just want my sister back if you're willing." We took it slowly. Dinner every few months, holiday gatherings with our parents, gradual rebuilding of trust. Jake kept his word. He never asked me for money, never tried to change the property arrangements, never made excuses for his past behavior. By the time my parents passed away, Dad from a stroke at 78, Mom from cancer 2 years later, we'd rebuilt something that resembled a real sibling relationship. At Mom's funeral, Jake and I stood together at the graveside, and he said something I'll never forget. "Thank you for saving our family by refusing to enable it anymore." Today, 5 years after that devastating discovery in the lawyer's office, I own both of my grandparents' houses. The Oak Avenue property provides steady rental income, and I live in the Maple Street house where I grew up, surrounded by memories of the people who loved it before me. Jake visits occasionally with Linda and their daughter. He has a management position at the warehouse now and just bought his first house. Our relationship isn't what it was when we were kids, but it's honest and healthy in a way it never was before. Mrs. Rodriguez still lives next door, and she often tells people the story of how I saved myself and my family by standing up for what was right. Sometimes people ask if I regret how everything happened, if I wish I'd handled things differently. The truth is, I don't know if there was any other way to break the toxic patterns that had developed over so many years. Sometimes a family has to fall apart completely before it can be rebuilt on a healthier foundation. What I learned through all of this is that love without respect isn't really love. It's exploitation wearing the mask of family obligation. And that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for people is to stop enabling their worst behaviors, even when it feels cruel in the moment. I kept my grandmother's note and I think about it often. Love and sacrifice should flow both ways. It took a crisis to teach my family that lesson, but we all learned it eventually. The houses my grandparents built with their own hands are still in the family, just not in the way anyone originally planned. But maybe that's exactly how it was supposed to happen. Maybe my grandparents would be proud to know that their legacy ultimately went to the grandchild who understood the value of hard work and sacrifice, who fought to preserve what they built. As I write this, I'm sitting in the kitchen where my grandmother used to make Sunday dinners, where my mother learned to cook, where I spent countless hours growing up. The house is filled with love and sacrifice that flows both ways now, between me and the memories of those who came before, and between me and the family members who learned to respect the boundaries I fought so hard to establish. In the end, I didn't just inherit 2 houses. I inherited the knowledge that standing up for yourself isn't selfish. It's necessary. And sometimes, the people who love you most are the ones who need to learn that lesson the hardest way possible. My story isn't really about money or houses or wills. It's about learning that you can't pour from an empty cup, and that teaching people to respect you sometimes requires you to stop accepting less than you deserve. The family I have now is smaller than the one I started with, but it's built on mutual respect and genuine care, rather than obligation and exploitation, and that makes all the difference in the world.